My name is Clive Morrison, and I was 62 the year my daughter sent me a text telling me Christmas was no longer mine to come to. 7 words. No explanation, no punctuation, no call beforehand. I was in the garage when it arrived, a strip of cedar bent between clamps on the work table, the whole space smelling of wood shavings and resin. Before I go back to that afternoon, I need you to know what came after it. Because 3 weeks later, somewhere over the Rockies, my phone lit up with 19 missed calls from the same daughter who had just decided I didn't belong at her table. Let me take you back first. I was 49 when my wife got sick. Pancreatic cancer, the kind that doesn't negotiate. She was diagnosed in March and gone by October of the same year. Our daughter was 15. Our son was 9. You don't have a plan for that. Nobody hands you a manual. You just get up the next morning and get the kids to school and go to work, and then you do it again. And at some point, the numbness becomes something you mistake for coping. I was an electrician. Union, mostly commercial work, hospitals, schools, a few of the bigger office buildings in and around Peterborough. It wasn't glamorous, and I knew it, but it was honest and it paid well enough and I could take overtime when I needed it, which in those years was often. I sold my truck the autumn after she died and took the bus for nearly 2 years, so I could keep my daughter's residence money intact when her RESP came up short. I never told her that. She assumed the truck had given out. She'd have felt responsible, and that wasn't her weight to carry. I didn't miss things. That was the line I drew. Not one volleyball game, not one school concert, not one hockey tournament for my son in the frozen arenas of central Ontario, where the coffee came from a thermos and the bleachers never warmed up. I was there, still in my work clothes half the time, hands smelling of electrical tape and solvent, but I was there. I need you to understand that before anything else. I also need to tell you about the canoe. 3 winters back, I started building a cedar strip canoe in my garage. A project I'd thought about for 20 years, but something always came up, and then my wife got sick, and then the kids needed me, and then somehow I was 60, and the plans were still folded in a drawer beside the spare batteries and the takeout menus. My grandson was 6 when I finally started. He'd come out to the garage on Saturday mornings and hand me clamps and watch the cedar strips take shape, the way a hull emerges out of nothing but patience and sequence. He started calling the shavings feathers, the curling strips of cedar that peeled off under the hand plane. Feathers, he decided, because they curved the same way. He asked one morning if he could keep some. I said of course. He went and found an old jam jar and filled it with them and took it home. He kept it on the windowsill in his room. I know because he showed me on FaceTime once, turning the jar so the cedar curls caught the light. "Grandpa," he told me very seriously, "I'm keeping these forever." I told him that was fine by me. I promised him we'd paddle the Rideau together when the canoe was done, just the 2 of us. He shook on it. At 6 years old, he shook on it like a man who understood what a promise was. My son-in-law came into our lives 5 years ago. My daughter brought him home one Easter, and I could see within the first hour that he was the kind of man who assessed rooms the way a building inspector does, quietly, efficiently, filing away what he found. He worked in commercial mortgage financing downtown, long lunches, good suits, the kind of job where the product is confidence. He shook my hand that first night and held it a half-second too long, the way people do when they're measuring something. He never called me Dad, not once in 5 years. Always Clive, even after the wedding, even when my daughter used Dad in the same sentence. I noticed, but I let it pass. I was good at letting things pass. The comments were always dressed up as curiosity. "Still running the old F-150? Said with the easy smile of a man who drove a new Audi. "Union work, that's good stability in this market." As though stability were something slightly embarrassing to require. He touched the door frame of my garage workshop once. I'd sanded and hung it myself, and said it had a real handmade quality. The word handmade the way a gallery visitor says it about a folk painting. I laughed it off. I told myself he was young and city polished and meant no harm. I wanted to like the man my daughter had chosen. I almost managed it. The exclusions came slowly, and that's the thing about slow. You don't feel the temperature dropping until you're already cold. The first Christmas they hosted, fine. The second they spent it with her in-laws in Oakville. Third, I got a call 2 days before my daughter's 35th birthday. "It's just a small thing, Dad, mostly work friends, you'd find it boring." I said of course whatever's easiest. I said that so many times it stopped sounding like generosity, and started sounding like what it actually was, which was fear wearing a polite coat. My grandson's 6th birthday party I learned about through a photo my daughter posted on Facebook. Balloons, cake, a Saturday afternoon with everyone there but me. When I called, she said it had fallen on a weekend she thought I had plans. I hadn't had plans. I kept saying whatever's easiest, and every time I said it, there was a little less of me left in her life to erase. The text came on a Tuesday in late November. I was in the garage, a cedar strip clamped into position, the CBC afternoon program low on the radio. My phone buzzed on the workbench. Dad, we're keeping Christmas intimate this year. Just the 4 of us. I read it once, then again, then a third time, the way you do when the words won't sit right. 7 words, no period, no softening of any kind, the sort of message you'd send to cancel a dentist appointment. I set the phone next to the cedar strip. I looked at the half-built canoe. I thought about my grandson and the feathers on the windowsill. I typed back, "Is everything okay?" 3 dots appeared. I watched them. My chest did something I didn't have a name for. Then the dots disappeared and nothing came. I stood in the garage a long time after that, phone in hand, waiting for a reason that wasn't going to arrive. I didn't beg. I'd spent my whole adult life not begging. But standing there under the fluorescent light with the smell of cedar around me, I started to count the cost of all that silence I'd been keeping. All the times I said whatever's easiest. All the years I made myself smaller so I wouldn't be a burden. I told myself that was love. I was starting to think it was something else entirely. I tried once more before I gave up on talking, called my daughter on a Wednesday afternoon, kept it simple. "Can we get a coffee? Half an hour. Just us." There was a pause, then the phone changed hands smooth, the way he did everything. "Clive, it's me, my son-in-law. She's right in the middle of something." I called my daughter. "She's just swamped this week. You know how December gets." "It's a coffee." I think what we're all looking for right now is a bit of breathing room going into the holidays. For everyone's sake. His voice was warm, perfectly calibrated. "She's building something here, Clive. Let her have the space to do it." I could hear my daughter somewhere in that kitchen. She didn't take the phone back. "All right," I said. "You take care of yourself." I hung up before he could be gracious about it, looked at the plane ticket I'd printed and left on the kitchen table. Calgary. My son, a real Christmas somewhere. I'd give them their space, all of it. My grandson called me that Friday on his mother's old tablet. He'd figured out FaceTime on his own. His face filled the whole screen, too close, the way kids hold cameras. "Grandpa, are you coming for Christmas?" I picked my words carefully. You don't pour adult poison into a child's cup. "Not this year, bud. I'm going out west to visit your uncle." His face fell, but the canoe, you said spring. "Spring is still on, I promise." You pinky promised. "And I keep those." I said it slowly, so he'd hold it. "The canoe is still happening, that I swear." He was quiet a moment, then lowered his voice like a spy. "Grandpa, why don't Mom and Dad want you at Christmas?" My chest went tight. "What makes you say that, bud?" I heard them in the kitchen. He glanced toward the door behind him. "Dad said, you make everything complicated." And Mom was crying. And Dad said, his voice dropped. He said a word I'm not allowed to repeat. There it was, carried by a 7-year-old. I kept my voice flat water. "None of that is yours to fix. I love you. Your mom loves you. That's the true part." "Are you mad at me?" "Never. Not once. Not possible." He almost smiled. Then I heard a door open somewhere behind him. A voice. "Ben, who are you talking to?" "My son-in-law." My grandson's eyes went wide. "I gotta go, Grandpa." The screen went black. I sat there staring at my own reflection in the dark glass and made a decision that had nothing to do with the Christmas table. 2 days after the text, a letter arrived. Heavy cream envelope, my name written by hand, the return address from the Peterborough Indigenous Friendship Center on Aylmer Street. I read it standing at the mailbox in the November cold. I should explain something I had never mentioned at a single-family dinner in 22 years. When my wife was dying, she asked me to promise her one thing. She'd spent her career as a social worker and had watched too many kids age out of the foster system, with no trade, no credential, no one in their corner. "Promise me you'll do something, Clive. Whatever you can manage. Just don't let it slide." The week after her funeral, I walked into the Friendship Center and asked if they needed a journeyman electrician to run some basics. That was 2003. Since then, quietly, on my own time, I'd been running workshops there 2 evenings a month. Basic wiring, safety codes, how to prepare for a Red Seal exam. When some of the youth couldn't cover their apprenticeship fees, I helped out of my own pocket. I never named it or announced it. It was just something I did because I'd promised someone I loved. 63 young people had come through those workshops over the years. Many were now journeymen and journeywomen, electricians, plumbers, carpenters. A few had started their own companies. I had never mentioned any of it at dinner. It felt private, like something that belonged to my wife and me, not to anyone's impression of me. The letter said the center wanted to honor me at their annual recognition gathering. The whole community would be there. An elder would speak. Could I come? I called the coordinator, a woman named Dorothy who had been running programming there for 15 years, and told her I had a flight to Calgary. The gathering is the evening before your flight, she said. You can do both. And Clive, I've been watching people walk into real lives because of what you gave them. Don't rob them of the chance to say thank you to your face. I sat with the phone against my ear, coffee going cold. Let me think about it, I said. Don't think too long, Dorothy said, and hung up. I went. I put on the suit I'd worn to my son's university convocation and drove into the city. The hall was full, 150 people, maybe more, folding chairs in long rows, a small stage with a banner, the smell of bannock and coffee. Dorothy met me at the door and steered me firmly toward the front. The elder spoke first, then Dorothy, then the people I hadn't expected. A woman who now runs her own renovation company in Belleville stood up and said she'd done my wiring workshop at 19, and it had changed the direction of her life. A man in a Carhartt jacket said he was a Red Seal electrician now and employed 6 people. He pointed at me and said that man right there didn't have to do any of it, and he did it anyway, and he never once asked us to remember his name. A young woman near the back was crying before she'd even said a word. I sat with my hands folded and my ears burning and wished for a trapdoor in the floor. I build things so I don't have to stand in front of rooms. But I looked at those faces, real people with real lives, and something settled in me. These people had never once made me feel optional. Dorothy called me up, the room rose, all of it on its feet, for a retired electrician in a 20-year-old suit. That was when I noticed a man near the coffee station, watching me with an expression I recognized. Measured surprise. The look of someone fitting 2 pieces together that he hadn't known belonged to the same puzzle. I'd seen his photo once on a screen my son-in-law had been scrolling. He was my son-in-law's largest client, a commercial developer, a significant account. He found me by the coffee afterward and put out his hand. Clive Morrison, Claude Beaulieu, that was something remarkable up there. We talked easily, the way 2 men who work with their hands can talk even when one of them wears a blazer that cost more than my monthly pension. He asked how I came to be involved with the center. I mentioned my wife. He listened without checking his phone, which I noticed. Then he asked if I had family in the area. I mentioned my daughter, her husband's firm. His expression changed, a small thing, but I saw it. He's been managing our commercial financing for 3 years, he said slowly. He's never mentioned you, not once. A pause. That's strange. If my father-in-law had been standing on that stage tonight, I'd have mentioned it at every meeting we ever had. I didn't say anything. That's actually strange, he said again, half to himself. Then he looked up and shook my hand once more. Real honor, Clive. He moved back into the crowd. I stood there with my paper cup and felt the ground shift, very slightly, under a man who wasn't even in the room. The next morning I drove to the airport in the dark. Long-term parking, carry-on bag, a paperback I wouldn't read. At the gate, for the first time in longer than I could remember, I turned my phone completely off. Not silent, off. Black screen. I wanted the quiet. I'd earned it. I kept it off the whole flight. 4.5 hours over the country I'd lived in my whole life. The Rockies coming up white below the clouds, my son waiting on the other side of them. For the first time in months, I felt like a man who had chosen where he was going, rather than retreating from where he wasn't wanted. I turned my phone on in Calgary. It took about 15 seconds for everything to arrive. Missed call, missed call, missed call. The notifications stacked faster than I could read them. 19 missed calls, all from my daughter. One text underneath them, a single line, "Dad, please call me when you get this. I'm so sorry. I didn't know." I stood at the end of the jet bridge and looked at that number a long time. My son had come inside to meet me, which he doesn't always. He took one look at my face and put his arm around my shoulder without saying a word. We walked out to his truck together in the cold Calgary air. I need to call her, I said. I know, he said. Have your coffee first. He'd brought a travel mug from home. Tim's 2 sugars, the way I've taken it since before he was born. I drank half of it, then I called. She answered before the first ring finished. Dad. Her voice broke on just the one word. I'm here, I said. I'm listening. And then it all came out. The photos from the gathering had gone up on the Friendship Center's page overnight, shared by the city councilor who'd attended, then shared again, and then the comments started. Your dad gave 22 years to this community. The workshops put my nephew into his trade. Does your family know what he's been doing all this time? She'd woken Christmas morning to dozens of notifications, all of them telling her about her own father in a voice she didn't recognize because she'd never thought to ask. Why didn't you ever tell us, she said. Any of it. 22 years, Dad. Because it wasn't yours to be impressed by, I said. I made a promise to your mother. That's all it ever was. Silence, the kind that has weight in it. He wrote the text, she said finally. The Christmas one. He drafted it and showed it to me and said it was cleaner this way. Less room for negotiation, he called it. I sent it. Her voice went quiet. I've been letting him do things like that for years. Edit me. Translate me. I told myself it was because he's better with words, but that's not why. I know, I said. I've made myself so small, Dad. Her voice cracked. I look at who I've been these last few years and I don't recognize her. I let her sit in it, not to punish her. Because some things you have to feel all the way through or they don't change. I don't need the Christmas seat back, I told her. That's not what this is about. Then what do you need? Your son, I said. His name was enough. I want to be his grandfather. No schedules handed down from on high. No visits canceled for a cold that isn't real. I made him a promise about a canoe and I need to be able to keep it. Yes, she said immediately. God, yes. He's been asking to call you all morning. I told him to wait until I spoke to you first. Put him on. The phone moved. Small hands, a fumble then. Grandpa? Hey, bud. Mom showed me the pictures from last night. There were so many people, and you were wearing a suit. It's a good suit. You helped all those people. His voice was absolutely certain, the way children are certain about things that matter. That's the coolest thing in the whole world. Are you keeping the feathers? I asked. A pause. In my jar on the window, I haven't moved them once. My eyes stung. I turned toward the wall of my son's kitchen so he wouldn't see. Spring, I said. You and me. We finish the canoe and we paddle the radeau. Pinky promise? Already made, and you know I keep those. I know, he said, you always keep those. I'll tell you the rest of it quietly, because it happened quietly, and the quiet parts deserve to stay that way. Claude Beaulieu shifted his account to another firm in February. He sent a short email, professional, about a change in direction. In those circles, a short email from an account that size says everything that needs saying. 2 other clients followed over the spring. My son-in-law had built his whole career around managing perceptions, and the one crack he couldn't see coming, a father-in-law he'd spent 4 years making invisible, turned out to be the one he couldn't sand down. I didn't know most of the details until months later. I wasn't watching. I was in my garage. My daughter asked him to leave in January. She told me she'd been thinking about it longer than she'd admitted to herself. He kept saying it was for the family. She told me on one of our Sunday calls, which we'd started keeping again. Real ones now, not obligation calls. And I finally heard how that sounded. He wasn't protecting us. He was managing us, managing you right out of us. People like that call control by nicer names, I said. I know that now. We were both quiet a moment. I said whatever's easiest too many times, I told her. That's on me too. I made it easy. We're done with that? We're done with that, I said. Spring came and I kept my promise. My grandson flew out to stay with me for 10 days. We cleared space in the garage, put the hockey gear in the corner, spread the plans on the workbench. He sanded until his arms ached and never once complained. He learned to use a spoke shave. He learned that you measure twice because cedar doesn't forgive, and regret is a waste of good wood. He got a splinter on day 3 and wore the bandage 4 days after it healed because he was proud of it. We talked while we worked. The way you can really only talk when your hands are busy with something else. He told me about school, about a friend who'd moved to Kelowna, about missing his dad sometimes, even though he understood why things had changed. I told him it was all right to miss someone and be glad they were gone, both at once, that people were complicated, even the ones who let us down. My daughter came for the last 3 days. She stood in the garage doorway a lot, a mug of tea going cold in her hands, watching us. She gave us the right kind of space, the kind that opens up instead of closes in. On the last morning, we carried the canoe down to the water. I'd borrowed a truck and driven us out to a lake the evening before. My grandson held the stern while I steadied the bow, and we walked it through the long grass to the shoreline. He climbed in. It floated. Of course it floated. I don't build things that sink. He looked up at me with the sun in his eyes and paddled himself out 20 feet, one hand trailing in the cold spring water. Then he turned back and looked at me with the kind of expression I don't have a word for. Not pride exactly. More like recognition. Like he understood something for the first time, about what it means when someone keeps a promise. We did it, Grandpa. We did, Bud. My daughter stood on the shore behind me. When I glanced back, she was watching her son drift out on the water in a boat her father had built, and she wasn't saying anything. She didn't need to. My phone buzzed that evening, a message from her, a photo, her dining room table, an empty chair pulled slightly back, a small handwritten card resting on the seat. Dad's seat. 3 words, no punctuation needed. I typed back the only thing there was to say. Save it for me, on my way. And this time I meant it. Because this time I knew the room was real, and the people in it weren't going to make me earn my place at it. I learned all of this the slow, expensive way, and maybe you don't have to. Here is what I know now that I didn't at 62. You do not have to make yourself smaller to deserve a place in the lives of people you love. I spent years calling it patience, calling it keeping the peace, calling it being the kind of father who never makes trouble. It wasn't any of those things. It was fear wearing a sensible coat. The moment I stopped shrinking, everything shifted. Not because I planned it. Not because I schemed anything. I just let myself be seen in one room full of people who already knew who I was, and the truth did the rest of the work on its own. If someone treats your presence as optional, believe them. Then find the people for whom your absence would leave a real gap. They exist. I promise you they exist. Sometimes dignity isn't loud. Sometimes it's just a quiet man buying a plane ticket and turning off his phone. The canoe lives at the lake now. My grandson sends me a photo of it every summer. Always some version of the same image. Him in the bow, hand in the water, grinning. He paddles it with his mother sometimes. Once with a friend from school who'd never been in a canoe before, and spent the whole time shrieking with delight. He still has the feathers. The jar is on his windowsill. I know because he showed me on FaceTime last week. Turned it in the light, the cedar curls golden and soft inside the glass, the same way he did when he was 6 years old, and certain he was keeping them forever. Turns out he was right.